She spent 3 years learning how to smile at the man who killed her brother. 3 years choosing the dress, the perfume, the exact angle of her chin. Tonight, inside the Plaza Hotel, surrounded by chandeliers and men who buried bodies for breakfast, Aurora Bianchi was finally going to humiliate Dante Valente in front of every crime family in America. She had the words rehearsed. She had the knife in her clutch. What she didn't have was the truth. And the truth was about to tear her revenge apart in ways she could never have prepared for. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Now stay with me until the very end because what Aurora is about to learn will change everything. The car smelled like leather and old money, and Aurora Bianchi hated every inch of it. She sat in the back of the black Lincoln with her knees pressed together so tight the muscles ached, watching Fifth Avenue slide past the tinted glass in streaks of gold and red. Her hands were folded in her lap like a schoolgirl's, but underneath the ivory silk clutch, she gripped the handle of a small folding knife she'd bought from a pawn shop in Queens 2 weeks ago. The blade was 3 inches long, cheap steel. It wouldn't kill a man like Dante Valente. She knew that. She wasn't stupid. But it would draw blood. And tonight, blood was the point. "You're sweating," the driver said without turning around. His name was Marco. He'd worked for her father back when her father still owned a restaurant in Bensonhurst instead of a hospital bed in a state-run facility. Marco was the closest thing she had left to family, and he didn't approve of any of this. "I'm not sweating." "You're sweating, Aurora, on your upper lip. Wipe it before you walk in there." She flipped down the mirror behind the passenger seat and saw what he meant. A thin sheen of moisture had broken out above her mouth, and her mascara was already threatening to smudge in the corner of her left eye. She dabbed at her face with the back of her wrist and tried to slow her breathing the way the therapist had taught her years ago, back when she'd still believed talking could fix anything. In through the nose, out through the mouth, count of 4. It didn't work. Nothing worked anymore except the thought of Dante Valente's face when she said her brother's name out loud. "You don't have to do this," Marco said. "Yes, I do." "You're 26 years old, kid. You got a degree. You got teeth in your head. You could move to Phoenix tomorrow and never look back." "Phoenix? It's a city in Arizona. I know what Phoenix is." "Then go there. Go anywhere. Don't walk into a room full of those people." She looked at the back of his head. His hair had gone gray in patches over the last 3 years, mostly because of her. She had not been an easy person to love. She hadn't been an easy person to bury a body next to either, which was what Marco had effectively done when he agreed to drive her tonight without telling anyone. "Marco." "What?" "If something happens to me in there, if I don't come back out." "Don't. Just listen, if I don't come back out, you drive away. You don't wait. You don't call anyone. You drive to my father's room and you sit with him until it's over. Promise me." He didn't answer for a long time. The car rolled to a stop at a red light on 58th, and a woman in a fur coat crossed in front of the headlights with a small dog on a rhinestone leash. The dog was shivering. The woman was laughing into a phone. "I promise," Marco said finally. "But you better come back out, Aurora. You hear me? You better come back out." She nodded. She didn't trust her voice. The plaza came up on their right like a wedding cake somebody had set on fire. Every window was lit. Town cars stacked 4 deep along the curb. Men in tuxedos stood under the gold awning smoking cigarettes and pretending they weren't watching the street for threats. Aurora recognized 2 of them. One was a Genovese consigliere named Paulie 2 times. The other was somebody she didn't want to recognize, a man with a scar through his eyebrow who had come to her father's restaurant once when she was 19 and put a hand on her hip while she was pouring water and laughed when she flinched. She had hated him then. She hated him more now. But he was not the man she was here for. Marco pulled up to the valet stand and put the car in park. "Last chance," he said. "Open the door, Marco." He opened the door. She stepped out into the cold November air and felt the silk of her gown move around her ankles like water. The dress had cost her $4,000. It was the most expensive thing she had ever owned, and she had bought it specifically because she knew Dante Valente liked women who looked like brides. 2 years ago, she had spent 6 months working as a cocktail waitress at a club in the meatpacking district, just to listen to his men talk about him when they got drunk. She had learned everything she could. He liked white. He liked silence. He liked women who didn't laugh too loud and didn't ask questions and didn't reach for the check. She had become all of those things on the outside. She had become a knife on the inside. The valet stared at her too long, then caught himself and looked at the ground. Aurora handed her ticket to no one because she had no ticket. She walked past the smoking men, past the scar-eyebrowed bastard who looked at her like he might remember her face and then decided he didn't, and into the lobby of the Plaza Hotel. The noise hit her first, a wall of it. Music from a string quartet bleeding down the staircase, 300 voices folded over each other in conversation, the clink of glassware, the slap of leather soles on marble. The smell came second. Perfume layered 6 deep cigar smoke from a private room somewhere off to the left. The particular sweet rot of orchids that have been cut and arranged and left too long under hot lights. Aurora gave her name at the door. The man with the clipboard looked her up and down once, found her on his list, and nodded her through without a word. That was the part she had been afraid of. The list. Getting on it had taken 9 months of careful work, 2 introductions through a Bianche cousin who didn't know what she was planning, and 1 favor she didn't want to think about ever again. But she was on the list. She was inside. She was inside. And somewhere in this room was the man who had killed Lorenzo. She moved through this crowd slowly, the way she had practiced in her bathroom for months. Chin slightly down, eyes slightly up. A small private smile that suggested she knew something the rest of the room didn't. Men noticed her. She felt their attention land on her shoulders, her collarbones, the slope of her back where the dress dipped low. She did not return any of it. She was looking for one face only. She found him near the bar. He was taller than she remembered from the photographs. That was the first thing she registered, and it surprised her because she had studied those photographs for so long, she thought she had memorized every inch of him. But the camera had lied about his height, or maybe just about the weight of him in a room. Dante Valente stood with his back to a marble column, a crystal glass of something amber in his left hand, listening to an old man talk about something Aurora couldn't hear. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning either. His face had the stillness of a man who had decided a long time ago that expression was a luxury other people could afford. She felt the air leave her chest. She had not expected him to be beautiful. She had expected him to look like what he was. She had wanted to walk into this room and see a monster and feel her hatred confirmed and clean. Instead, she was looking at a man with a hard jaw and dark hair cut short on the sides, and eyes that even from 20 feet away looked tired in a way she recognized. The tired of a person who had not slept properly in a long time, because every time they closed their eyes, someone they had loved was waiting behind their eyelids. It made her angrier than anything else could have. How dare he look tired? How dare he look human? She turned to the bar and ordered a glass of champagne she did not intend to drink. The bartender was a thin Eastern European man who poured with a flick of the wrist that suggested he had been doing this in finer rooms than this one for 30 years. She paid him in cash. She left a tip large enough that he looked at her face for a second longer than he needed to. "Be careful tonight, miss," he said quietly. She didn't answer. She picked up the glass and turned around and walked directly toward Dante Valente. The old man talking to him was Carmine Ricci, a former Genovese capo who now sat on the ruling council and was rumored to be dying of pancreatic cancer. He saw her coming first. His eyes flicked up over Dante's shoulder, then back, and something in his face shifted in a way that made Dante turn his head a quarter inch. That quarter inch was when their eyes met. Aurora had imagined this moment for 3 years. She had imagined it in the shower. She had imagined it on the subway. She had imagined it lying in bed staring at her ceiling at 3 a.m. while her father coughed himself awake in a room she could no longer afford to keep him in. In every version of the imagined moment, she had been calm. She had been ice. She had walked up to him with her brother's name in her mouth like a blade, and she had cut him open in front of his entire world. But she had not accounted for his eyes. His eyes were not the eyes of the photograph. They were darker. They were also, impossibly, looking at her like he already knew her, like he had been waiting. She kept walking. Her heels did not falter on the marble. She stopped 3 feet from him, and she made herself smile the small private smile, and she heard her own voice as if from a great distance say the thing she had practiced. "Mr. Valente, I've heard so much about you. I have to say, I'm disappointed." The conversation around them did not stop. Not at first. Carmine Ricci raised one gray eyebrow. Dante did not move at all. His glass did not move. His chest did not visibly rise or fall. He just looked at her. "Disappointed how?" he said. His voice was lower than she had braced for, quieter. It went into her sternum and stayed there. "I heard you were dangerous," she said. "I heard you were the man who held this whole side of the room together. But you look like somebody's accountant who got dressed up for a costume party. No offense." She said it loud enough. Loud enough that the cluster of men 3 feet to her left heard. Loud enough that a woman in red behind Dante's shoulder turned her whole head. Loud enough that Carmine Ricci, who had spent 40 years learning when to laugh and when not to, made the small, disbelieving sound of a man who has just watched someone walk off a roof. Dante did not react. That was almost worse. She had counted on him reacting. Reaction was leverage. Reaction was a thing she could push against. But he just kept looking at her, and the quiet around them spread the way oil spreads on water, slow and unstoppable. And she realized that the entire bar had begun to notice that something was happening at the marble column. She raised her chin another half-inch. "Word is you couldn't even handle a small problem in Brooklyn last year without it taking 3 months and 4 bodies. Word is, your uncle would be ashamed of you. Word is the only reason anyone in this room still calls you sir is because they're waiting for somebody better to come along. So no, I'm not afraid of you. I think you're a disappointment in a nice suit." She had said too much. She knew it as soon as the last sentence left her teeth. The script had been shorter. The script had been 3 lines. But once she started, she could not stop. And now the silence around the column was a real silence, the kind that pulls in the silences of other rooms. Carmine Ricci looked at the floor. The woman in red took 2 steps backward without seeming to move her feet. And Dante Valente set his glass down on the small round table beside the column. He set it down very carefully, like a man who had learned a long time ago what happened when you slam things in a room full of people who were watching for weakness. "Walk with me," he said. "No." Aurora. The sound of her name in his mouth almost made her drop the champagne glass. He knew her name. He had known her name before she opened her mouth. He had known she was coming. She forced her hand to stay steady. She made herself look up into his face and she said, "You don't get to call me that." "I don't get to call you a lot of things," he said, and the corner of his mouth did something that was not a smile. "But we are not going to do this in front of these people. We are going to walk to the terrace and we are going to talk like adults. Or I am going to have somebody walk you to the terrace and you are not going to like which one of my men I send. Pick." She picked. She didn't really pick. Her body picked for her because the alternative was a scene that would end with her being escorted out and her chance gone forever. She let him put his hand on the small of her back. The hand was warm through the silk. It was warmer than it should have been. She hated that she noticed. He walked her past the bar, past the string quartet, past a pair of double doors that a man she didn't know opened for them without being asked. They stepped out onto a private terrace overlooking the southern edge of Central Park. The wind hit her bare arms and she felt the goosebumps come up in a wave. The doors closed behind them. The party became muffled, far away, the way the world sounds underwater. There was no one else on the terrace. Of course there wasn't. He had made sure of that before she ever walked in. He let go of her back as soon as the door shut, and he stepped away from her, 2 long strides, and he turned and looked at her across the cold gray stone, like he was deciding whether to throw her over the railing. "You want to tell me," he said, "what the hell that was?" "You know what that was." "I know what it looked like. I'm asking you what it was." "It was the truth. In front of your whole world. For once. The truth. You killed my brother." She had not planned to say it like that. She had planned to lead up to it. She had planned a longer conversation, a more cutting one, a slow unspooling that ended with him on his knees in some metaphorical sense, exposed. But the wind was cold and his face was close, and her hands were shaking now, really shaking, and the words came out of her like vomit. "You killed Lorenzo Bianchi 3 years ago in a parking garage on Atlantic Avenue. You shot him twice in the chest and once in the head, and you left him on the concrete next to a Toyota Camry like he was nothing. He was 24 years old. He was my brother. He was the only family I had left that could still walk, and you put him in the ground. And tonight I came here to tell every single person in that room what kind of man you are." Dante did not move. For a long second, the only thing she could hear was the wind and the very faint sound of the string quartet through the closed doors. Then he said, very quietly, "I didn't kill your brother. Don't." "I didn't kill him, Aurora." "Don't you say my name. Don't you stand there in your $4,000 suit and look at me like you're sorry." "I know what you did. I have known what you did since the day they pulled him out of that garage. I sat in a hospital room with my father while a detective told us the security footage was missing and the witness was dead and the case was closed before it was opened, and we both knew. We both knew who it was. The whole neighborhood knew. The whole neighborhood was wrong. You're lying." "I am not." "Then who? If it wasn't you, who?" He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time, and something in his face did something she did not understand. It was not guilt. It was not denial. It was something more complicated than either, something tired and old and full of a grief that had nothing to do with her. And when he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she had to lean in to catch it. "Your brother was not who you think he was." "What?" "Lorenzo was working with people, federal people, for about 8 months before he died. He was wearing a wire to meetings he should not have been able to get into. He had given them names, real names, names that would have ended families. Yours included, if anyone had cared enough about you to look." "You're lying." "I have the recordings, Aurora." "You're lying. I have his voice on tape telling a federal agent that he could get them inside my uncle's house for a meeting on the 3rd of October. My uncle was dead on the 4th. Your brother was dead on the 11th. You can do that math any way you want." She took a step backward without meaning to. Her heel caught on a seam in the stone, and she felt herself start to go, and her hand shot out to catch the railing, and the champagne glass, which she had been holding the entire time, slipped from her fingers and went over the side. She heard it shatter on something 14 floors below. "He wouldn't," she said. "He did." "He wouldn't have. He was trying to save our father. He was trying to pay for the treatment. He wouldn't have. He told me. He told me he was working at the docks." He was working at the docks. He was also wearing a wire. Both things were true. "You're lying. You're standing there and you're lying to me because you killed him, and you don't want me to say it out loud, and I am going to say it. I am going to walk back in there, and I'm going to say it. I don't care what you do to me after." "Aurora." "Don't say my name." "Aurora, I did not kill your brother." "Then who did?" "I am not going to tell you in 5 seconds on a terrace." "Then we have nothing to say to each other." She tried to push past him. He didn't grab her. He didn't have to. He just stepped sideways once and she found herself against the railing with the cold stone at the small of her back and the city dropping away behind her and Dante Valente standing close enough that she could smell him, which was something dark and clean and expensive that she would think about later and hate herself for thinking about. He put one hand on the railing on either side of her. He did not touch her, but she could not move. "You came here tonight," he said, very low, very close, "in a dress you bought to look like a bride, with a knife in your purse, to humiliate me in front of every family in this country. You did your homework. You did 3 years of homework. I respect that. I do. But you did your homework on the wrong man, baby girl, and I am going to give you exactly one chance to walk out of this hotel tonight with your life, because I owe somebody that. So you are going to stand here and you are going to listen to me very carefully." His breath was warm against her temple. Her own breath had gone shallow and bad. There was sweat on the back of her neck. There was sweat between her shoulder blades. There was something happening in her body that she did not recognize and did not want to name, a heat that was not fear and was not rage, and was something underneath both, and she hated him for it. She hated him with a clarity she had not known was possible. "What?" she said. "What do you want me to listen to?" "I want you to listen to the name Antonio Russo." She blinked. She knew the name. Every kid who'd grown up in any of the 5 boroughs knew the name. Antonio Russo had been her father's age once, a button man for the Valente family back in the 80s, and somewhere along the way he had risen. He was an underboss now. He was the kind of name people said carefully and not very often. "What about him?" she said. "Your brother had a meeting with Antonio Russo on the 8th of October, 3 days before he died. The meeting was not on any calendar. Antonio told me about it last year. He told me he had tried to flip your brother back, get him to feed the feds bad information, and your brother had refused. He told me he had then handled the situation himself, on my behalf, because he was loyal to the family." "Then it was him," Then it was Antonio. That is what I thought too. That is what I let myself believe, because believing it meant I did not have to look any closer. But 3 weeks ago, I started looking closer. Why? Because my uncle died on the 4th of October. She stared at him. My uncle. The man who raised me. The man who taught me everything I know about how to walk into a room. He died on the 4th, in his own kitchen, of what was called a heart attack. There was no autopsy. The family decided there did not need to be one. Antonio Russo told me my uncle had been sick for months and had hidden it from us. I believed him. I buried my uncle. I took the seat at the table. I have spent 3 years running this family the way my uncle would have wanted, and the entire time I have been taking orders in ways I did not realize I was taking them from the man who killed him. You don't know that. I know it now. How? 3 weeks ago, a lawyer in Palermo died and his office was cleaned out by an estate company. A box of papers came to me. There were things in that box, Aurora. There were things in that box that I am not going to describe to you on a terrace in November. But I am going to tell you that one of those things was a payment record, in my uncle's handwriting, dated the 2nd of October, transferring a large sum into an account he did not control. A handwritten note attached to the record said the words, "If anything happens to me, look at Antonio." She did not say anything. She could not say anything. The wind came up off the park and pushed her hair into her mouth, and she did not move to get it out. Your brother did not die because he was a traitor, Dante said. Your brother died because he had figured out something about Antonio Russo that Antonio could not allow anyone to know. I think your brother had gone to the feds not to bring down my family, but to bring down one man inside it. I think he was trying to do something brave. I think he died for it. And I think the man who told you and the whole neighborhood that I gave the order is the same man who actually pulled the trigger. You have spent 3 years hating the wrong person, baby girl, and I have spent 3 years sitting across the table from the man who murdered the only family I had left, and tonight you walked into my room in a white dress and called me an accountant, and I should be angrier than I am, but I am not, because I have been waiting 9 months for somebody to do exactly what you just did. What? Somebody had to crack the room open. Somebody had to make a scene loud enough that Antonio would see it and feel safe. He thinks I am weak now. He thinks the families think I am weak. He is going to make a move in the next 90 days, and I'm going to be ready, and I cannot do it alone. You're saying, I am saying I do not know yet what I am saying to you. I am saying I owe you a conversation that is not 5 minutes on a terrace. I am saying I owe you proof. I am saying that if you walk back into that ballroom and finish what you started, you will not live to see Christmas, because Antonio Russo has men in that room tonight who will read your face the way I just read it, and they will decide correctly that you are a problem. I am saying I can keep you alive for the next 48 hours if you let me. After that, you can decide what you believe. I don't believe any of this. I know. I don't believe a word of it. I know, Aurora. Stop saying my name like that. Like what? Like you knew him. He looked at her. For a second she thought he was going to say something terrible, something that would unmake her. But he did not. He just looked at her, and then he very slowly lifted one hand off the railing and reached toward her face, and she froze, and his thumb brushed the corner of her mouth where the lipstick had smeared, and his thumb came away red. You bit yourself, he said. I didn't. You did. Inside, when you were yelling at me, you're bleeding a little. There, right there. She could taste it now, iron at the back of her teeth. His thumb hovered for one more second. Then he lowered his hand. There are men inside that room who answer to Antonio, he said. There are also men who answer to me. I am going to walk you back inside. You are going to stand next to me. You are going to look like a woman who has just been disciplined by a dangerous man and learned her lesson. You are going to let him put his arm around you and pretend you wish he wouldn't. You're going to be quiet for 30 minutes. Then my driver is going to take you home. Not your driver, mine. And tomorrow morning I am going to send a car for you, and you are going to come to a place I will name, and you are going to look at the things in that box. And then you are going to decide whether you still want to put a knife in me. Do you understand? No. Yes, you do. No, Aurora, do you understand? She nodded. She did not know why she nodded. She nodded, and she felt her whole life come apart inside her chest like a sheet of paper held over a flame. And she thought of her brother's voice on a tape she had never heard saying things she had never imagined him saying. And she thought of her father lying in a state bed with tubes in his arm. And she thought of 3 years of sleepless nights wasted on a hatred that had been aimed at the wrong target by somebody else's hand. And she felt something dangerous and hot rise up in her throat that was either a sob or a scream, and she swallowed it. "Good girl," Dante said, very quietly. She wanted to slap him. She wanted to do something else, something she did not have a word for, and she hated him more for that than for anything else. He stepped back. He opened the terrace door. The party noise rushed in like water through a broken dam, and he held out his arm to her the way a man holds out an arm to a woman he is about to dance with. And Aurora Bianchi, who had come to the Plaza Hotel that night to destroy Dante Valente, took it. His hand closed over hers. It was warmer than it had any right to be. They walked back into the ballroom together, and across the room, near the bar where she had stood 20 minutes earlier, a man with silver hair and a tailored black tuxedo turned his head to watch them. His eyes were small and dark. His mouth did not move. He held a glass of red wine very still in his right hand, and he watched Aurora the way a man watches a dog that has just walked into a room where the dog is not supposed to be. She did not know who he was. But Dante's hand tightened around hers in a way that told her, without a word, that the man at the bar was Antonio Russo, and that Antonio Russo had just seen everything he needed to see. And as the string quartet started a new piece and the crowd around them began, slowly, to pretend nothing had happened, Aurora felt her phone vibrate once against her thigh through the silk of her clutch. She did not look at it then. She could not look at it then. But 2 hours later, in the back of a car that was not Marco's car, with Dante Valente's coat around her shoulders and the city of Manhattan sliding past in the dark, she would finally open her phone and read the message that had come in the moment Antonio Russo's eyes had landed on her face. The message was from an unknown number. It said only 6 words. "Your father is not dying anymore." She read the message 3 times before she understood it. The car was a black Mercedes with tinted windows so dark she could not see her own reflection in them, and the driver was a man whose name she had not been given. He did not speak. He did not look at her in the mirror. The radio was off. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the click of the wipers against a rain that had started somewhere around 72nd Street, and Aurora Bianchi sat in the back seat with Dante Valente's coat heavy across her bare shoulders and stared at her phone until the screen went dark. She turned it back on. She read the 6 words again. "Your father is not dying anymore." Her hand was shaking. She watched it shake the way a person watches a stranger's hand do something foolish on a subway platform. She felt very far away from her own body, very far away from the silk dress and the smudged lipstick and the cold sweat dried at the small of her back. And somewhere underneath all of that distance, there was a high, thin sound in her ears that she eventually recognized as her own breathing gone wrong. "Stop the car," she said. The driver did not answer. "I said stop the car." He kept driving. "Hey." She leaned forward, the coat sliding off one shoulder. "Hey, pull over. I need to make a call." "Mr. Valente said no calls until we get to the apartment, miss." "I don't care what Mr. Valente said. Pull over." The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror for 1/2 second and then back to the road. He had a thick neck and a small white scar at the base of his ear, and he did not look like a man who pulled over for anyone. "You can call from upstairs," he said. "Upstairs where?" "The apartment, miss." "What apartment? Whose apartment? Where the hell are you taking me?" 12 blocks. Maybe 10 in this weather. She sat back. She did not have a choice. She did not have a choice about anything that was happening to her, and she could feel that fact pressing against the inside of her ribs like a second heart. The recognition that, for the first time since she was 23 years old, she had stepped completely out of the carefully measured rage that had been the only thing holding her upright. The rage had been a structure. The rage had been load-bearing. And on a stone terrace 14 floors above Central Park, a man with tired eyes had taken a hammer to the load-bearing wall of her entire adult life, and now she was sitting in a stranger's car at midnight in November with no plan, no leverage, no brother, and a text message from an unknown number telling her that the dying father she had been trying to keep alive for 3 years was somehow not dying anymore. She tried to call Marco. It went to voicemail. She tried him again. Voicemail. She tried him a 3rd time, and her thumb was trembling so hard she misdialed and called a Thai restaurant in Astoria that her mother used to order from. She hung up. She tried Marco a fourth time. The fourth time he picked up on the second ring. Aurora. Marco. Where the hell are you? In a car. Whose car? I don't know. Aurora. Marco, just listen to me. You said you were coming out. You said, I am coming out. I came out. I am out. I'm in a car. Marco, you have to go to the hospital. You have to go to my father right now, tonight. What? You have to go right now. Aurora, what happened? What did he... Nothing happened. He didn't do anything. Just go to the hospital. Right now. Tell me when you get there. Don't talk to anyone in the lobby. Go straight to the room. Tell me he's there. He's there. He's always there. Tell me. Drive there and tell me. She could hear him swearing under his breath, and then she could hear the click of his seatbelt and the sound of the Lincoln's engine turning over wherever he had parked it, and she could hear the city going past his window, and the relief of hearing Marco moving was the first solid thing she had been able to hold on to in 20 minutes, and she pressed the phone hard against her ear and closed her eyes and tried to breathe. Aurora. Yeah. Are you safe? I don't know. Are you hurt? No. Are you scared? She did not answer that one. The Mercedes turned left onto a side street she did not recognize. The rain had thickened into something colder, almost sleet, and the streetlights came through the windows in long yellow smears. The driver took another left and pulled into the underground garage of a building she had passed once on a date in college and never thought she would see the inside of, and the metal gate rolled down behind them with a sound like a coffin lid sliding shut. Marco, I have to go. Aurora, wait. Go to the hospital. Call me back. She hung up before he could argue. The driver killed the engine. He came around and opened her door without looking at her, and she stepped out onto the concrete in heels she had stopped feeling an hour ago, and a woman in a charcoal suit was already standing by the elevator. The woman was maybe 40. She had her hair pulled back so tight it pulled at the corners of her eyes, and she had a small black earpiece in her right ear. And her hands were folded in front of her with the unbothered patience of somebody who had spent her whole adult life waiting for problems to walk out of cars. Miss Bianchi. This way, please. Where am I? You're at the building, miss. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm allowed to give you down here. Upstairs you can ask Mr. Valente whatever you'd like. The elevator opened. Aurora got in because the alternative was standing in a parking garage in a wet silk dress with no exit she could find. The woman in the charcoal suit pressed a button without a number on it. The elevator climbed. Aurora watched the small light blink, and she counted the floors by the small dings, and she got to 18 before she lost track. And when the doors opened, she stepped out into a hallway that smelled like cedar. The hallway had one door at the end. The door was open. She walked toward it the way a person walks toward a doctor's office to hear results she already knows. Dante Valente was standing inside a kitchen the size of her entire apartment, with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the elbows, and a glass of water in his hand. And he looked up when she crossed the threshold, and the expression that went across his face for half a second was something she would think about for a long time afterward without ever fully naming. He had been waiting for her in the kitchen, she realized. Not the living room, not some office. The kitchen. Like he had been trying to seem ordinary. Sit down, he said. No. Aurora. I want to talk to my father, now. I want a phone that I know is clean, and I want to talk to him directly, and then I want you to explain to me what is happening, and then I want you to put me back in a car and send me home. Your phone is clean. You don't know that. I know that. The car was clean, the elevator is clean, this floor is clean. You can call whoever you like from in here, and nobody is listening except me. And I am not listening if you go into the other room. You want to go into the other room. Go. The door's right there. She did not move. He set the water down on the marble island. His hands, she noticed for the first time, were not as steady as they had been on the terrace. There was a small tremor at the base of his right thumb. She wondered how old it was. Talk to me about the text, he said. How do you know about the text? Because I sent a man to your father's hospital 9 days ago to start watching the room. He called me 40 minutes ago. He said something was wrong with the monitoring numbers. What does that mean? It means the numbers were too good. What does that mean, Dante? It means somebody had been adjusting his medication for at least a week, possibly longer. It means the man you have been mourning for 3 years has not been dying as fast as the doctors have been telling you he was dying. It means somebody on the inside of that hospital has been keeping him sicker than he had to be, for reasons I do not yet understand, and tonight somebody else, also on the inside, decided to stop. She was holding the edge of the island. She did not remember reaching for it. You're lying. I'm not. You're standing in your kitchen and you're lying to me. I'm not lying, Aurora. I would not have you here if I were lying. I would have let you walk out of the plaza tonight, and Antonio's people would have taken care of the rest, and I would have read about it in the morning. I'm telling you these things because I think the same person who arranged for your brother to be blamed for being a traitor also arranged for your father to die slowly enough that you would never have time to ask questions about anything, and I think that person is going to come for you next, and I think you are running out of time. My father is in a state facility. He doesn't have anything anybody wants. Your father owned a restaurant on 86th Street for 26 years. So what? He sold it. He sold it after my mother died. Who did he sell it to? She opened her mouth and then she closed it. She did not know. She had been 17. She had been busy losing her mother. She had not asked. It's a parking lot now, she said finally. It is not a parking lot. It was a parking lot for 2 years. It is now a wine bar with a private room downstairs that is used for meetings of a certain kind. Your father did not sell that building. Your father sold that building to a holding company that he was told was a real estate group out of New Jersey, and the holding company was owned, through 3 other holding companies, by Antonio Russo's son-in-law. And the room downstairs is where Antonio meets with the people he does not want to meet with, anywhere we can see them. And every time he sits in that room and orders a glass of wine, Aurora, he is sitting on top of a building he stole from your father by lying about the buyer, and your father is the only living person besides his lawyer who could put that story together if anyone ever asked him the right questions. So no, he does not have anything anybody wants. He has only the one thing. He has a memory. She felt sick. She had felt sick all night, in different shades, but this was a new color of it, a deep cold green at the back of her tongue, and she sat down on the stool at the island because her legs had stopped consulting her. My brother, she said. Yeah. Lorenzo, he found out. I think so. He found out and he went to the feds because he thought he couldn't go to your family because your family was the problem. Yes. And Antonio found out he had found out. Yes. And Antonio killed him and made everyone think you did it. Yes. And then Antonio bought my father a slow death so my father couldn't say anything. Or so your father would die quiet before you got old enough to start asking why a restaurant on 86th Street was suddenly a wine bar. And then tonight somebody on the inside changed something. Maybe got cold feet. Maybe got bought by somebody else. Maybe as one of mine. And I do not know about it yet. I am going to know about it by tomorrow. But somebody pulled back on whatever they were doing to your father, and somebody sent you that text, and I do not know yet whether that text was a warning or a threat. But Aurora, I am telling you, the difference does not matter to you right now. What matters is that the man who has been controlling the rate of your father's dying just lost control of it, and he is not the kind of man who handles losing control well. Her phone buzzed against the marble. She jumped. She actually jumped, the way she had not jumped since she was a child, and she grabbed at the phone and her thumb slid across the screen 4 times before it unlocked. Marco. He's here, Marco said. His voice was thin and high and out of breath. He's here, Aurora. He's sitting up. What? He's sitting up in the bed. He's awake. He's looking at the television. He turned and he looked at me when I walked in. He said my name. He said, Marco, what are you doing here at this hour? And his voice was, Aurora. His voice was clear, clearer than it has been in a year. She covered her mouth with her hand. How is that possible? She whispered. I don't know. I don't know. The nurse came in behind me. The nurse looked at the chart and she looked at me and she said, his numbers are different tonight. She said it like she didn't understand it. She said, I'm going to call the doctor. Then she left and your father turned to me and he said, Marco, where's my daughter? Oh, Aurora. Yeah. He's asking for you. He's lucid. He's asking for you by name. She could not breathe. She had not heard her father say her name in 9 months. The last time he had said it, he had been confused. He had thought she was her mother. He had reached for her wrist with a hand that had no strength in it, and he had called her by her mother's name. and she had pretended he had not. She had gone home that night, and she had stood in her shower for an hour and a half with the water all the way hot, and she had cried until her face was raw. And now he was sitting up. Now he was asking for her. She looked across the kitchen at Dante. He was watching her face very carefully. He had not moved. The glass of water was still on the marble. The tremor at the base of his thumb was still there. "Marco," she said, "listen to me very carefully." "Yeah." "Do not leave that room. Do not leave him alone. Not for a minute. Not to use the bathroom. Not to get coffee. You sit in the chair next to the bed and you do not let anyone touch him, except a doctor whose face you recognize from before tonight. If anybody you do not know walks into that room with a syringe in their hand, you stand up and you put your body between them and the bed. Do you understand me?" "Aurora." "Do you understand me, Marco?" Yeah, kid, I understand." I'm coming as fast as I can." She hung up. She looked at Dante. "I have to go," she said. "I know. I have to go right now. I know. There's a car downstairs. Different car, different driver. The driver's name is Eli. He's mine. He knows where the hospital is. There will be 2 more men there before you arrive. They'll be in plain clothes. One will be reading a magazine in the second-floor waiting area. The other will be in a uniform that does not belong to that hospital but looks close enough. They will not approach you. They will not speak to you. They are there if somebody else tries to." "Why are you doing this?" He did not answer her right away. He picked up the glass of water and he drank from it and he set it back down, and he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand the way a man wipes his mouth after taking a hard punch. And he said, "Because I owe somebody." "Who?" "My uncle." "Your uncle is dead." "Yeah, he is. And he asked me a thing once before he died, and I did not understand the thing at the time, and I have spent the last 3 weeks since I opened that box understanding it, and I am not going to explain it to you tonight, Aurora. Tonight you are going to your father. Tomorrow morning you are coming back here. Bring a bag. Bring whatever you need for 3 days. After tomorrow morning you do not go back to your apartment, you do not go back to your job, you do not go to any of the 4 coffee shops you go to, and I have a list of all 4 if you want to see it. Antonio has been watching you for longer than I have." "How long have you been watching me?" 11 days. 11 days? Since I opened the box, I told you. I have been understanding things. You knew I was going to be there tonight. I knew somebody from the Bianca side was going to try something at that gala. I did not know it was going to be you, and I did not know it was going to be that bad. It wasn't bad. It was... Aurora. You walked into a room full of men who have killed people for less, in a dress designed to make sure none of them missed you, and you called me a disappointment. It was bad. It was the worst thing I have ever seen anyone do in public, and I have been in this life since I was 16 years old. She felt her face get hot. I had a knife. I know you had a knife. In my purse. I know. You knew that too. I knew the second you walked in. You were holding the clutch wrong. Women who carry clutches that small do not carry them by the spine. They carry them by the flat. You were carrying it by the spine because you were thinking about getting your hand inside it fast. I clocked it before you opened your mouth. She started to laugh. It was a bad laugh. It was not really a laugh. It was the sound a person makes when their whole evening has been built on a foundation they did not realize was glass, and they are now standing on the bottom of a swimming pool full of shards. I'm going to my father, she said. Yes. And tomorrow I am coming back here. Yes. And you are going to show me the box. Yes. And then I am going to decide whether I believe you. Yes. And if I decide I don't believe you, Dante. She looked at him directly. She made herself. If I decide I don't believe you, I am going to finish what I started tonight. I am going to walk into the next room you are in front of more people than were at the plaza, and I am going to put your name in front of the federal government in a way you will not survive. So whatever is in that box, it had better be real. He looked at her for a long second. Then he gave a small nod that was barely a nod. It's real, he said. She turned and walked out of the kitchen. She made it as far as the elevator before her legs began to shake hard enough that the woman in the charcoal suit had to put a hand under her elbow. Aurora did not protest. She let the woman steer her into the elevator and down to the garage and into the second car, which was a black Audi this time. And the driver named Eli was a young black man with a careful face and an expensive watch, and he handed her a small bottle of water without saying anything, and she drank from it because it gave her hands something to do. The hospital was 22 minutes away in the rain. She did not look at her phone. She did not look out the window. She sat with the bottle of water in her lap, and she thought about her father saying her name in a voice that was clear for the first time in a year. And she thought about a wine bar on 86th Street where Antonio Russo drank above the ghost of her father's restaurant. And she thought about her brother on the 8th of October 3 years ago, sitting across a table from a man who was going to have him killed 3 days later. And she thought about how that brother had not told her. How that brother had been wearing a wire for 8 months and had eaten dinner with her every Sunday and had laughed at her jokes and had hugged her on her birthday and had not told her any of it because he had been trying to keep her safe. And she had spent 3 years hating the wrong man because the brother she loved had loved her enough to lie to her face. The tears came. She had not expected them. She did not let them make a sound. They ran down into the collar of Dante's coat, and she scrubbed at them with the heel of her hand, and Eli pretended not to see. The hospital came up on the right. It was a state facility on the edge of the Bronx. It was ugly. It smelled, even from the parking lot, like industrial cleaner and old soup. She had spent more nights in its hallways than she had in any apartment of her own adult life. And she knew the security guard at the front desk by his first name, and she knew the night shift charge nurse on the 4th floor, and she knew which elevator was always broken, and she knew the smell of her father's room with her eyes closed. She walked through the lobby in a $4,000 wet silk dress with Dante Valente's coat around her shoulders, and she did not look at anyone. And when she got to her father's room on the 4th floor and pushed the door open with her shoulder, he was sitting up in bed. He was actually sitting up. He had a plastic cup of water in his right hand. His hair was thin and gray and standing up in a tuft on one side. He had a small smear of something white at the corner of his mouth, toothpaste maybe. And he was watching a late-night talk show with the sound turned down. And when he turned his head and saw her in the doorway, his face did something it had not done in almost 2 years. It recognized her. "Aurora," he said. His voice cracked on the second syllable. But the syllable was there. The whole word was there. She crossed the room in 4 steps, and she put her face down against his shoulder, and she did not cry, because she had cried in the car, and she was done crying for now. But she stayed there with her face against him for a long time, and she felt his hand come up, slowly, like a hand that had forgotten its job, and rest against the back of her head. "You're cold," he said. "I'm okay." "You're wet." "It's raining, Dad." "You came in the rain, in that dress. From where?" "From a party." "What party?" "It doesn't matter." "It matters, Aurora. Look at me. It matters." "Where were you tonight?" She lifted her head. She looked at his face. He had lost so much weight in the last year that the bones of his cheeks were a stranger's bones, and his eyes had that wet shine of a man who has just woken up from a very long sleep and does not yet trust the room. But he was looking at her. He was looking at her, and he was asking the question, and she could not lie to him. Not anymore, not after everything. "I was at the Valente Gala," she said. His face changed. It changed in a way she did not expect. It did not become angry. It did not become afraid. It became something older, something more tired than either, and his hand on the back of her head tightened for 1/2 second and then released. "Oh, baby," he said. "Dad, you went. I went. You went to him." "Yes." "Aurora, you weren't supposed to go to him." "Aurora. Aurora, listen to me. Lorenzo told me not to let you go to him. Lorenzo told me before he died. Lorenzo told me, he said, Dad, if anything happens to me, don't let her go to Valente. He said, the one she needs to stay away from is—" He stopped. His eyes moved past her. His mouth opened. She turned. A man in pale blue scrubs was standing in the doorway. He had a small plastic tray in his hands. On the tray was a syringe, capped, and a folded square of gauze, and a strip of medical tape, and he was smiling at her in a way that did not move any part of his face above the mouth, and Marco was not in the room. Marco was not in the room. She had not noticed until that second, and now her eyes flicked to the chair beside the bed, and the chair was empty, and Marco's coat was over the back of it, but Marco was not in it, and the bathroom door across the room was closed, and there was no sound from inside. and the man in the scrubs took one step into the room and closed the door behind him with his elbow. "Mr. Bianchi," the man said in a voice that was too calm, "it's time for your evening medication." Her father's hand closed on her wrist. It closed hard. "Aurora," her father said very quietly, without taking his eyes off the man in the doorway, "that is not the night nurse." The man in the scrubs took a second step into the room. Aurora's wrist was on fire where her father was gripping it. She had never felt his hand have that kind of strength in it, not even when she was a child, not even when he was hauling crates of tomatoes off the back of a truck in the alley behind the restaurant. He was holding her now, like a man holding the last piece of driftwood in a flooded river, and his eyes had not left the doorway. "That is not the night nurse," he said again, quieter. "I'm new on the floor, Mr. Bianchi." The man's voice was flat. It was a voice that had been taught how to say sentences without putting any human inside them. "Nurse Diaz is on her break. She asked me to bring your 11 o'clock. "Diaz doesn't take a break until 2, her father said. "Then I was misinformed, sir. May I come closer?" He was already closer. He was already 6 feet from the bed. He had crossed half the room while he was talking, his sneakers making no sound at all on the linoleum, and Aurora realized with a sick small clarity that the silence was not because the floor was clean. The silence was because his shoes had been chosen. She put her free hand into the clutch on her lap. Her fingers found the folding knife. It was such a stupid weapon. It was the weapon of a girl who had walked into a ballroom thinking she understood violence. But it was a weapon, and her hand was on it, and she made herself slide her thumbnail under the small ridge and open the blade against her palm without taking it out of the bag. "Where's Marco?" she said. The man smiled. It was a polite hospital smile. It did not reach the corners of anything. "I'm sorry, miss. I don't know who that is." "He was in that chair. The man in that chair, 5 minutes ago. Where is he?" "There was no man in the chair when I came in, miss." "You just walked in." "Yes, miss." "Then how do you know there was no man in the chair when you came in, if you just came in?" The smile did not move, but something behind his eyes did. A small recalculation. A door being closed somewhere inside his face. "I'm going to have to ask you to step into the hallway, miss, while I administer Mr. Bianchi's medication." "No." "It's hospital policy." "No, it isn't." "Miss, step away from the bed." He did not step away from the bed. He took the cap off the syringe. And he held it up to the light. And he tapped it once with his fingernail to clear the air, and the gesture was so perfectly practiced that Aurora understood, finally, all the way down to her bones, that the man had done this before. Many times, probably in this exact room. He was not a man who had been sent tonight in a panic. He was a man who had been coming to this room for months. He was the one who had been keeping her father sick. She stood up. She stood up so fast the chair behind her tipped and clattered against the wall, and her father's hand fell away from her wrist and her bare feet. When had she lost her shoes? Hit the cold linoleum, and her balance went sideways for 1 second before she caught it on the edge of the bed. "Out," she said. Get out of this room. Miss, I need you to calm down. Get out. Miss." The bathroom door across the room rattled. It rattled twice, the way a door rattles when somebody on the other side is hitting it with the side of his fist, and then there was the muffled sound of Marco's voice through the wood. Marco saying her name, Marco saying Aurora, Aurora, the door, Aurora, the lock, and Aurora's eyes went to the doorknob of the bathroom, and she saw, for the first time, that someone had jammed a folded piece of metal into the gap between the knob and the frame. A coin, maybe. A piece of a name badge. Something thin enough to wedge and stiff enough to hold. The man in the scrubs had locked Marco in the bathroom before she walked into the room. He had been waiting for her too. She moved. She did not think about it. She did not have a plan. Her body simply moved, the knife coming up out of the clutch in a clumsy, graceless way that would have made any actual fighter laugh, and she put herself between the man and the bed, and she heard her own voice come out of her like a stranger's voice, low and ugly and not afraid of itself. "You touch him, and I will put this in your neck." The man looked at the knife. He looked at it for a full second. Then he laughed. It was a soft, surprised laugh, like a man who has just been told a joke at a funeral, and he set the tray down on the rolling table beside the bed with the kind of unhurried care that meant he was not worried about her, and he flexed his fingers once, twice, and he took a step toward her. "Sweetheart," he said, "put that down before you hurt yourself." She did not put it down. He moved. He moved fast, faster than she had been ready for. His left hand came up and caught her wrist, and his right hand came across her cheek with the flat of his palm. Not a fist, a slap. Hard enough that her head snapped sideways and her vision went white at the edges, and she felt the knife fall out of her fingers and hit the floor and skid under the bed, and her father shouted something behind her that she could not quite hear because there was a high, thin ringing in her left ear, and the man had her by the throat now, not squeezing yet, just resting his hand there, and his face was very close to hers. He smelled like nothing. That was the thing she would remember. He smelled like nothing. No cologne, no soap, no sweat, nothing. Like he had been built in a room without air. "You have any idea," he said softly, "how much trouble you caused tonight?" She could not answer. She could not get a breath under his thumb. Mr. Russo was just going to let your old man go in his sleep. He was being kind. He was being patient. He was waiting for the cancer to do the work for him. But you went to that party in that white dress, and you ran your mouth at the wrong person, and now my whole evening has changed, and I have to do this the messy way, and I have to do you too. And that's going to make the paperwork in this place very ugly for somebody tomorrow." His thumb pressed up under her jaw. She felt her vision narrow. She felt her hands, useless, scrabbling against his wrist, against the front of his scrubs, and her right hand caught on the lanyard around his neck, and she pulled, and the lanyard broke, and the plastic name badge came off in her palm, and she did the only thing she could think of to do. She slammed the corner of the name badge into his eye. She did not hit the eye. She missed by a half-inch and hit the bone of his brow, but the corner of the badge was sharp, and her hand was driven by everything she had left, and the plastic cut him from the eyebrow to the temple in a line that went deep enough to fountain, and he let go of her throat and reeled back with his free hand going to his face, and Aurora fell against the bed. And her father who 20 minutes ago she had thought was dying, her father grabbed the plastic cup of water off the tray beside him and threw it. The cup was nothing. Plastic, lukewarm water, a sad, pathetic thing. But it hit the man in the face, and water went into his cut eye, and he made a sound that was not a word. And in the half-second of his blindness, Aurora found the call button hanging on the side of the bed, and she did not press it once. She pressed it again and again, mashing it with the heel of her hand, and somewhere down the hall a buzzer began to scream. The man in the scrubs heard it. He looked at the door. He looked at the syringe on the tray. He made a calculation Aurora could see happen on his face, and the calculation came down on the side of leaving alive instead of staying to finish the job. And he turned and yanked the door open and was out into the hallway in 3 steps, blood already running down the side of his neck. And Aurora was screaming now, screaming wordlessly, and feet were pounding down the hall toward the room. The first person through the door was not a nurse. The first person through the door was a man in a gray jacket reading nothing, because he had thrown the magazine away 10 seconds ago when he heard the buzzer, and Aurora understood without being told that this was the man Dante had said would be in the second-floor waiting area. He was on the 4th floor now. He had been waiting closer than Dante had told her. He had a gun in his hand. He looked at her, and he looked at her father, and he looked at the open door, and he was gone, back into the hallway, after the man in the scrubs, and his footsteps disappeared down the corridor at a dead run. The second person through the door was the real night nurse, Diaz. Aurora knew her face. Diaz took one look at the room and another at Aurora's throat and put a hand to her own mouth and said something in Spanish that Aurora's father, in the bed, finished for her. Aurora dropped to her knees beside the bathroom door. The metal wedge in the doorknob was bent, but it was still holding. She worked her fingernails under it, broke 2 of them, did not feel it, got the wedge out and dropped it and yanked the door open, and Marco fell out into the room with his shoulder bleeding from where he had been trying to break the door open with his body for a long time. He had a knot on his temple the size of a plum. Someone had hit him on the way to the toilet. "Aurora," he said, "I know. He came in behind me. He had something. Chloroform, maybe? I don't know what it was. I lost about a minute, kid. I lost a whole minute. And then I woke up in the bathroom, and the door was locked, and I could hear him in here, and I couldn't—" "I know, Marco, I know. It's all right. It's all right. Sit. Sit down." She helped him sit on the edge of the bed. Her father reached over and put a hand on Marco's good shoulder, and Marco bent his head forward and closed his eyes, and Aurora stood up between the two of them in a soaked silk dress with the print of a man's hand still rising in red on her throat. And she looked at the empty doorway, and she did not cry. She did not cry, because she could feel something else rising in her now, something she had not felt before in her entire life. And the thing was not grief, and the thing was not fear, and the thing was not even the cold, clean rage she had carried for 3 years like a held breath. The thing was murder. She understood it without flinching. She had become, in the space of 1 minute against a stranger's hand, a person who was capable of killing Antonio Russo herself, with her own hands, slowly, and the recognition of that did not horrify her. It steadied her. She turned to Nurse Diaz. "I need a phone." Diaz handed her a cell phone without a word. Aurora called the only number she had. Dante picked up before the first ring finished. "Aurora." They came. A beat of silence on the line. "How many?" "One in the room, maybe more in the building. Your man went after him, the one in the gray jacket." "How is your father?" "Alive." "You?" "Alive." "Marco?" "Alive." "I'm sending 3 more. Stay in the room. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone you do not personally know." "Dante." "Yes." "He had a syringe." "I know. He has been coming here for months. He knew the schedule. He knew which nurse takes which break. He knew my father by name. He has been coming here for months, Dante. There is no way that happens without somebody on staff. There is no way." She heard him breathe out, slow. "I know. You knew about that too." "I suspected. I have not been able to confirm until tonight." "Who?" "Aurora." "Who, Dante?" "I do not have a name yet." "You have something. You wouldn't have suspected if you didn't have something. You said your man on the inside called you 40 minutes ago about the medication. 40 minutes ago is when I was at your kitchen counter. 40 minutes ago is when somebody decided to stop poisoning my father. 40 minutes ago, somebody made a choice. Who has that kind of access in that hospital, Dante? Who? You owe me a name." Another breath. "I will tell you tomorrow." "You will tell me now." "I will tell you tomorrow, when you are in front of me, when I can show you the documents." "Aurora. Aurora, listen to me. I am not refusing you. I am refusing to give you a name on a phone in a hospital room where 5 minutes ago a man tried to kill your father, because if you have the name on the phone, you will do something tonight that you cannot do tonight. You will do something tomorrow morning that we can both survive." "You don't know what I will do." "I know what I would do." She was quiet for a long second. "Send your men," she said. "I'm not leaving this room until they get here." 12 minutes. 12 minutes. She hung up. She handed Diaz back her phone, and she sat down on the edge of the bed beside her father, and she took his hand, and the two of them, and Marco, sat in silence in the small, ugly room while a buzzer kept screaming somewhere out at the nurse's station, and feet ran in directions she did not have to think about, and her father, after a long while, squeezed her hand. "Aurora." "Yeah, Dad." "What I was saying." "What?" Before he came in." She looked at him. He had aged 10 years in 2 minutes. The color was draining out of his face in a way she did not like, and his lips had gone gray at the corners, and his eyes were going small and wet and far away. And she understood that whatever they had done to him over months of careful poisoning had only been paused tonight, not undone, and that he did not have very much road left under his wheels. "What were you saying, Dad?" "Lorenzo told me. Before he died. Lorenzo told me. The one she needs to stay away from." "Antonio, I know, Dad. I know now." He shook his head. He shook it weakly, but he shook it, and his hand on her wrist became urgent again. "Not Antonio." "Dad?" "Not Antonio." "Dad, it's Antonio. It's Antonio Russo. Dante told me. The whole thing. He took the restaurant. He killed Lorenzo. He's been—" "Aurora." "Dad, Aurora. Listen to your father." She listened. She held her breath, and she put her face down close to his, and she listened. "Lorenzo did not tell me to stay away from Antonio Russo." "Then who? Then who, Dad? Who did Lorenzo say?" His mouth worked. His tongue had gone clumsy. The chemicals in him were doing something he was fighting against, and she could see him fighting, and she put her hand against the side of his face, and she said, Come on, Dad, come on. And he closed his eyes for a long second and then opened them and looked at her and said the name. He said the name. He said it clearly. He said it in a voice that for 1 second was the voice he had used when he was 45 years old and standing in the kitchen of the restaurant on 86th Street yelling at her about her grades. And the name went into Aurora's ears, and the name went into her chest, and the name stopped her heart for 1 full second. No, she said. He nodded. No, Dad. No, that's not possible. He nodded again, smaller. His eyes were closing. It's not him, she said. It can't be him. Dad, look at me. Dad, it can't be him. He's the one who... But she did not finish the sentence because she had finally understood all the way down what the sentence she was about to finish was. He's the one who is going to keep me safe. He's the one who put men in this hospital tonight. He's the one whose driver brought me here. He's the one who told me to come back tomorrow morning with a bag for 3 days. He's the one whose kitchen I was standing in 20 minutes ago. He's the one. She let go of her father's hand and she stood up. She backed away from the bed, and her bare heels slid on the linoleum, and she did not feel them. And Marco was looking at her like she had grown a second head, and Diaz had stepped back into the doorway looking for the doctor she had paged 5 minutes ago, and Aurora's mouth was dry in a way she had not been dry before in her life. Her father had said the name Valente. He had said it clearly. He had said, the one she needs to stay away from is Valente. He had not said Antonio. He had said the one name she had spent the entire evening unlearning. She did not know what to do with that. She did not know what to do with the fact that her brother Lorenzo, who had been wearing a wire, who had been working with federal agents, who had known more about everything than anyone had ever given him credit for, had used his last conversation with their father not to warn them about Antonio Russo, who was supposedly the bad one, but about the man whose coat was around her shoulders right now. The man whose driver was downstairs in the parking lot waiting to drive her back to a kitchen the size of her apartment. The man who had stood on a terrace 14 floors above Central Park and told her very softly that he was not the one who killed her brother. What if he was the one who killed her brother? What if everything she had heard tonight had been a story so good it had walked her in one evening from the position of his public enemy to the position of his guest? A story so good it had turned a knife in her purse into a coat across her shoulders, and a public scene into a private alliance, and 3 years of her hatred into a wet, sobbing relief at the news that the man she had been hating did not deserve it. A story so good she had given it her phone number and her father's hospital floor and her own front door. A story so good Antonio Russo had walked into the plaza tonight and let her see his face from across a room because he wanted her to see his face, because he was going to be the next chapter of the story Dante was telling her, and a story like that needed a villain. What if Antonio was the villain Dante had built for her? What if there was no box of papers from Palermo? What if the man who came to her father's hospital tonight with a syringe in his hand had been sent by Dante, on purpose, to terrify her in exactly the right direction? What if the man in the gray jacket who had run out of the room after him had been part of the same play? The rescue half of a kidnapping that did not need to be a kidnapping because she was already walking willingly into the car. She put her hand against the wall. She felt the wall against her palm. She felt the cold tile. She felt the small slick of cleaner that had been wiped across it that morning. She felt every single thing in the room except her own body. "Marco," she said. Marco looked up. His shoulder had bled through the gauze Diaz had put on it. His face was the color of old paper. But he heard something in her voice that made his eyes sharpen, and he started to stand up, and she shook her head. "Stay with him. Aurora, stay with him. Don't leave this room. Don't open the door for anyone except a uniformed cop, not a man in plain clothes, not a man who says he's mine, not a man who says he's anyone's. A uniformed cop, with a partner, with a radio. You understand me?" "What are you doing?" "I'm going." "Aurora." "Marco, I am going. I am leaving this hospital before Dante's 3 men get here, because Dante's 3 men are not coming to protect me. I do not know that for sure, but I do not know it is not true either, and I cannot afford to find out in this room with my father on this bed. So I am going." "Where?" "I don't know." "You don't know." "I will know when I get there." She bent down. She kissed her father's forehead. His skin was cold and waxy and his eyelids did not open, but his fingers against the sheet twitched in something that might have been her name. She straightened up. She looked at the clutch on the chair, with the broken knife somewhere on the floor under the bed where she could not reach it. She did not pick the clutch up. She looked at the coat across her shoulders. Dante's coat. Wool, dark, heavy, expensive. The kind of coat a man like him gave a woman like her on a night like this for reasons that could be kindness or could be a leash. She took the coat off. She folded it once. She set it on the chair on top of the clutch. She stood there in this wet silk dress, barefoot, in a state hospital room at midnight, with her father unconscious in the bed behind her and Marco bleeding on the edge of the bed, and Diaz still in the doorway whispering urgently into a desk phone. And she made a choice. She made the choice that she would think about for the rest of her life as the choice that had killed the girl in the white dress and put something else in her body in the girl's place. She walked out of her father's hospital room and turned, not toward the elevator, but toward the service stairwell at the end of the corridor. She went down. She went down 4 flights, fast, her bare feet slapping the concrete and the sound of her own breath the only thing in her ears. And when she came out at the loading dock at the back of the building, 2 men were already standing there in dark coats, looking up at the door she had just come through, and one of them had a phone to his ear, and the other was reaching very calmly into the inside of his jacket. She did not stop running. The man's hand was already inside his jacket when her bare foot hit the wet concrete of the loading dock, and she did not stop to see what came out of it. She cut left, hard, behind a dumpster that smelled of hospital laundry, and something sweeter underneath that she did not want to name, and her shoulder caught the corner of the metal and tore through the silk of the dress and tore through the skin underneath. And she did not feel it then. She felt it later. In a stairwell that was not the same stairwell, with her back against a wall that was not the same wall. With her hand pressed flat against her shoulder and the blood coming up through her fingers in a slow, steady warmth, and her teeth clenched so hard her jaw cramped, and the high, thin whine of her own breath being the only sound in a service corridor under a building she did not yet know the name of. But before that, before any of that, she ran. She ran across the loading dock, past a stack of empty oxygen tanks, past a security camera that she registered without slowing for, past a chain-link fence with a gap at the bottom where employees on a smoke break had stretched the wire over time. And she went under the fence on her stomach, on her elbows, the silk dress riding up to her hips and the gravel of the alley taking the skin off both her knees, and she came up on the other side in a parking lot behind a 24-hour bodega. Behind her, the 2 men in dark coats were running too. She could hear their shoes, hard soles, expensive soles, soles that were not made for running, that gave her 3 seconds maybe, 4 if she got lucky. She did not get lucky. The first shot came when she was 20 feet from the back door of the bodega. It went into the brick beside her head and threw a chunk of something hot against her cheek, and the sound it made was not the loud crack she had been raised on television to expect. It was a soft pneumatic cough, a sound like a heavy book being closed in a quiet room. She understood, with the part of her brain that was still working, that the man had a suppressor on the end of whatever he was holding, and she understood that this was not a man who had been told to bring her in alive. And she understood that everything she had been told tonight by Dante Valente about her own safety had been a lie of one kind or another. She turned a corner. She turned 2 corners. She cut through a lot full of black plastic garbage bags and the smell of old chicken bones, and she came out on a side street she did not know, and a yellow cab was sitting at the curb with its hazards on and a driver eating a sandwich at the wheel. And she did the only thing left to do. She slapped both hands against his passenger window. Drive. Lady, Drive right now. Drive. The driver looked at her face. He looked at her bleeding shoulder. He looked past her and saw what was coming up the sidewalk behind her. And he was a man who had been driving a cab in this city for 30 years and who had developed a very fast set of instincts about which fares to take. And he unlocked the back door without saying another word. She fell into the back seat. He pulled away from the curb so hard the door swung shut on its own momentum and clipped her ankle, and the cab took the corner on what felt like 2 wheels, and the man in the dark coat coming up behind them lifted his arm, and then the cab was around the next corner, and the man and his arm were not there anymore. Hospital, the driver said. No. Lady, you're bleeding. No hospital. Drive, just drive, anywhere, across a bridge. Take me across a bridge. He took her across a bridge. She did not look out the window. She lay on her side in the back seat with her cheek against the cracked vinyl and her hand pressed against the gash on her shoulder, and she watched the small red digits of the meter climb, and she thought about how she had $86 in her clutch, and her clutch was in a hospital room 4 miles behind her, and she thought about her father's face when he had said the name Valente, and she thought about the man on the loading dock reaching into his jacket, and she thought about Dante Valente standing in his kitchen with that small tremor at the base of his thumb, and she did not yet know what she believed about any of it. She only knew she was still alive, and that being alive cost $47.70 according to the meter, and that she did not have it.
She had the dress. She lifted her wrist and looked at the bracelet she had not taken off in 3 years. It had been her mother's. It had a small pendant on it shaped like a fig leaf, and the gold was real, and the bracelet was the only thing in the world she would never, under any circumstance she could imagine, have parted with. She unclasped it. The cab pulled into a 24-hour diner parking lot in a part of Queens she did not recognize, and Aurora Bianchi leaned forward over the seat and put her mother's bracelet into the driver's palm and closed his fingers around it and said, "It's worth 8 times the fare. Take it. Take the rest as a tip, and don't tell anyone what I looked like." The cab driver looked at the bracelet. He looked at her. He put the bracelet in his shirt pocket. "Go inside," he said. "Go inside and ask for Iris. Tell her Sal sent you. She'll put you in the back booth and she won't ask anything. You bleed in there for an hour. You decide what you're doing next. I never saw you." She nodded. She got out of the cab. She walked across the wet parking lot in bare feet that she could no longer feel below the ankle, and the bell above the diner door rang when she pushed it open, and a woman behind the counter with a name tag that said Iris looked at her once and pointed, without speaking, to the booth at the very back beside the kitchen. Aurora went. She sat down. She sat. A minute later, there was a paper bag of ice in front of her, and a glass of water with a lemon in it, and a stack of paper napkins, and a heavy gray hooded sweatshirt that smelled like dish soap and grease. And Iris's hand was on her shoulder for 1 second, and then it was gone. And Aurora was alone in a booth with her own face reflected in the dark window. And the face in the window was not a face she recognized. She had blood on her cheekbone. She had blood on her shoulder. She had blood somehow on her left earlobe. Her hair was glued to the side of her neck with sweat and rain. Her mouth, in the reflection, was a flat line. She pulled the hooded sweatshirt on over the dress. She pressed the ice against her shoulder. She drank the water in 3 swallows. Then she did the thing she had been putting off since the loading dock. She took the burner phone out of the small inside pocket where she had hidden it before she ever left her apartment that night. The burner had been part of the original plan. The original plan involved her getting arrested. The burner had been so she could call her father's facility from a holding cell without giving the police her real phone. She had bought it for $38 at a place on Steinway Street, and it had 100 prepaid minutes on it, and it had never been turned on until now. She turned it on. She did not call Dante. She did not call Marco. She called the only other person whose number she had memorized, the only number that lived in her actual head and not in a contacts list, and the number belonged to a woman she had not spoken to in 14 months. Lucia Russo answered on the 4th ring. "Hello?" "Lucia." A long silence. "Aurora." "I need to talk to you. It's after midnight. I know what time it is. You haven't called me in over a year." "I know. You stopped showing up to Lucia. Lucia. Listen. Listen to me. I need you to listen to me. Are you alone?" Another silence. This one had a texture. Aurora could hear, behind Lucia's breathing, the small sound of someone else turning over in bed and saying something soft and asking a question. And Lucia answered the someone in a voice that was not the voice Aurora had ever heard her use. And then Aurora heard a door close. And then she heard Lucia's bare feet on a hardwood floor. And then Lucia said, "I'm alone now. What is it?" "Your father." The line went perfectly still. "What about my father, Aurora?" "He killed my brother." "Aurora." "He killed my brother, and he has been killing my father for at least 8 months. And he sent a man tonight to put something in my father's IV line, and the man almost put it in my throat instead. And right now there are 2 more men in dark coats who tried to shoot me in an alley behind the building. And I have nowhere to go and nobody I can trust. And I'm calling you because you are the only person on this earth who has a reason to want him stopped, as bad as I do. Lucia did not say anything. Aurora put her forehead against the cold window of the booth, and she closed her eyes and she waited. Lucia and Aurora had been roommates their senior year of college. They had been the kind of friends who knew the worst things about each other. Lucia had told her on a fire escape in Morningside Heights at 3 a.m. during finals week what kind of man her father actually was, and what he had done to her mother, and what she planned to do about it eventually. Aurora had told her the same night that her brother had been acting strange for 2 months and would not say why. They had sworn on that fire escape that they would always pick up each other's calls. Then Lorenzo had died, and Aurora had gone underground inside her own life, and she had let the friendship die because she had not wanted Lucia to ever ask her what she was planning, because the answer would have hurt Lucia, and Aurora had not had room to care about hurting anyone else. That was 14 months ago. Lucia spoke very slowly. "I'm coming to get you." "I'm in a diner." "Where?" "Queens, I don't know. I'll ask. Hang on. Lucia, stay with me. Stay on the line." "I'm staying." Aurora got Iris's attention with a small motion of her hand and asked the address. And Iris told her, and Aurora gave the address to Lucia, and Lucia said, 45 minutes, maybe less. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. If anyone comes through that door looking at you, you get up and you walk into the kitchen and you find the back exit and you wait by the dumpsters. Lucia. What? Are you going to tell him? Aurora. He has been telling me you were going to die for 3 years. He has been telling me I had to be ready for it. He has been telling me you blamed the wrong family for what happened to Lorenzo. He told me he had tried to help you privately and you had refused. He told me a lot of things. Now I am sitting up in bed at 1 a.m. with the woman I love asking me what is wrong, and you are calling me from a payphone or a burner or whatever you are calling me from, telling me my father killed your brother. I am not going to tell him. I am going to come and get you, and you are going to tell me, in person, every single thing you know. And then I am going to make my own choices. She hung up. Aurora sat in the booth with the dead phone in her hand and watched the entrance. 40 minutes passed. She watched every car that pulled into the lot. She watched a woman come in to buy cigarettes and a man come in for a coffee and a teenager come in for a chocolate shake at 1:15 in the morning, and her hand on the burner phone went slick with sweat every time the bell over the door rang. At 1:42, a black Range Rover with tinted windows pulled into the lot and parked at an angle that left it pointing toward the exit, and a woman got out of the driver's seat in jeans and a leather jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, and Aurora recognized the walk before she could see the face. Lucia came through the door. She did not look at the counter. She walked straight to the back booth and slid into the seat across from Aurora, and the two of them looked at each other for a long second, and Lucia reached across the table and took Aurora's hand without saying anything. Lucia's hand was very cold. "Show me," Lucia said. Aurora pulled the hood of the sweatshirt back. She turned her cheek so Lucia could see the cut. She pulled the collar down so Lucia could see the bruising coming up around her throat. She let her hand fall away from her shoulder for a second so Lucia could see the soaked dark patch under the gray cotton. Lucia's face did not move while she looked. That was what Aurora would remember. Lucia's face did not move at all. When Aurora pulled the hood back up, Lucia said, "We're going to a doctor. Then we're going to my apartment. Not my father's apartment, my apartment. And we are going to lock the door, and you are going to tell me every single thing. Get up." Aurora got up. Iris did not look at them as they left. The bell rang. The Range Rover started. They drove for 20 minutes. Lucia did not ask any questions while she drove. She kept checking the rearview mirror, and once, she made a left where she should have made a right and went around a block twice, and Aurora understood without being told that Lucia knew how to do this because her father had taught her how to do this when she was 12 years old, and that Lucia had spent a long time not using what she knew. She was using it now. The doctor was a woman in a brownstone in a part of Brooklyn Aurora did not know. The woman did not ask for a name. She cleaned the gash on Aurora's shoulder and put 11 stitches in it without anesthetic because there was none in the house. And Aurora bit down on a folded leather belt that the woman gave her and did not scream. And Lucia held her other hand the entire time and watched her face and did not look away. When it was done, the woman gave Aurora a bottle of antibiotics and a small bottle of pills she said were for the pain,
and Lucia paid her in cash from an envelope she had brought with her, and they went back to the Range Rover. Lucia drove again. They went to an apartment on the top floor of a building in Cobble Hill that Aurora had never been to. Lucia had 2 locks on the front door. She used both. She walked through every room with the lights off, looking out every window, before she came back into the living room and turned on a single lamp. "Talk," she said. Aurora talked. She talked for an hour and a half. She told Lucia about the gala. She told her about the terrace. She told her about Dante and the box from Palermo, and the wine bar on 86th Street, and the kitchen, and the text message, and the hospital, and the man in the scrubs, and the syringe, and the name badge, and the call button, and the cup of water her father had thrown. She told her about Marco in the bathroom, and Diaz in the doorway, and the man in the gray jacket with the magazine. She told her about backing out of the hospital room with her father's last words still in the air, the name Valente. The name that should have been her enemy's name and had spent the evening becoming her ally's name. And she told her about coming down the service stairs and seeing the 2 men in dark coats on the loading dock with their hands going inside their jackets. She did not tell Lucia what she had decided in the back of the cab. She did not have to. Lucia sat on the couch across from her with her elbows on her knees and her hands folded against her mouth. And when Aurora finished, Lucia stayed perfectly still for a long time. Then she said, "I need to tell you something." Aurora waited. "My father has a safe in his study," Lucia said, "behind a portrait of my grandmother. He thinks I don't know about it. He's wrong. I've known about it since I was 9. I have never opened it. I have never given him a reason to think I would open it. But I know the combination because I watched him open it once when he thought I was asleep on the rug at his feet, and I remembered the numbers, and I have remembered them for 17 years. In that safe there are things. I do not know all of them, but I know there are notebooks. I know there are envelopes. I know there are recordings. I know because I have watched him put things in and never take them out. He keeps everything, Aurora. He keeps every single piece of paper that has ever passed across his desk that could hurt anybody. He keeps them because he thinks they protect him. He thinks if he is ever in a room he cannot walk out of, he will be able to bargain his way out with what is in that safe." Aurora's mouth had gone dry. "How long is he going to be out of that apartment?" Lucia looked at her. "Tomorrow night. He has a thing in Atlantic City. He'll be gone from 7 until at least 3 in the morning. The housekeeper goes home at 9. "Lucia." "I know." "Lucia, if we do this and we're wrong, you do not have a father anymore." "I have not had a father since I was 12, Aurora. I have had a man who lives in the same building as me and pays for my apartment and tells my fiancée what kind of wine to bring to dinner. That is not a father. That is a landlord with a name in common. And if we do this, and we're right, then I burn him. I burn him to the ground. I take what I find and I take it to people who can use it, and I do not look back. I have been waiting for a reason, Aurora. You just gave me one with your throat, so I am going to ask you exactly once. Do you want in?" Aurora did not answer for a long second. She was thinking about Dante. She was thinking about the small tremor in his thumb, and the way he had said her name on the terrace, and the way his coat had smelled, and the way he had not let go of her hand when Antonio Russo's eyes had crossed the ballroom. She was thinking about how much of him had been a story, and how much of him had been a man, and whether even he knew the difference anymore. She was thinking about the fact that her father had said the name Valente, and that if her father was right, then everything she had agreed to in that kitchen tonight had been the worst mistake of her life, and that if her father was wrong, then she was about to break into the home of the underboss of the Russo organization and steal his private records based on the half-coherent warning of a man being slowly poisoned to death. She thought about Lorenzo. She thought about the brother she had not known, the brother who had been wearing a wire for 8 months without telling her, the brother who, if Dante had been telling the truth, had been trying to bring down the man who had stolen their father's restaurant. The brother who, if her father had been telling the truth, had been trying to bring down something else, something larger, something she did not yet have the shape of. There was only one way to find out which brother she had actually had. "I'm in," she said. Lucia nodded once. She got up. She went into her bedroom. She came back out wearing dark jeans and a dark sweater and a small black backpack over one shoulder, and she dropped a second set of dark clothes onto the couch beside Aurora. "They'll fit,"
Take the pills, not the strong ones, just the antibiotic. You're going to need to be sharp." Aurora swallowed an antibiotic dry. She changed in Lucia's bathroom with the door closed, and she looked at herself in the mirror over the sink, and she did not recognize the woman in dark clothes with 11 stitches in her shoulder and a bruise blooming up the side of her neck. And that was good. That was, in a strange way, the first good thing that had happened all night. She did not need to be Aurora Bianchi for the next few hours. She needed to be whoever this woman in the mirror was. They left the apartment at 4:15 in the morning. Lucia drove. The streets were almost empty. The rain had stopped and the air smelled like wet pavement and exhaust. And the sky over Brooklyn was the kind of black that had stars hidden somewhere in it, but no longer the energy to show them. Antonio Russo's building was on the Upper East Side. Lucia parked 3 blocks away on a side street, and they walked the rest of the way in silence, hoods up, hands in pockets. The doorman at the front entrance would have known Lucia's face. They did not use the front entrance. There was a service entrance on the side street that the building staff used, and Lucia had a key to it, and the security camera over the door had been pointing at a slightly wrong angle for the last 6 months, which Lucia knew because she had been quietly watching it for the last 6 months. The way a person watches a door she has always thought she might have to walk through. They went in. They took the service elevator. Lucia keyed it to the 18th floor with a small magnetic fob that she had stolen from her father's housekeeper 6 weeks ago and had been waiting for a reason to use. The elevator climbed in silence. Aurora's heart was a small, frantic animal against her ribs. The cut on her shoulder was screaming under the antibiotics. She did not let any of it show on her face. The elevator opened onto a service hallway. Lucia led the way. They went past a laundry room and a janitor's closet and through a door that opened into the back pantry of an enormous apartment, and Aurora stepped onto a hardwood floor that had been polished that morning by a woman Lucia had grown up calling Tia. And the apartment was completely silent, and the alarm system on the wall by the kitchen was blinking green, which meant disarmed, which meant Lucia's father had left it disarmed for the housekeeper to come in early, which Lucia had been counting on. They moved. They moved through a dining room with a chandelier that hung over a table that could seat 20. They moved through a living room with a piano nobody in this family played. They moved down a hallway lined with photographs of Antonio Russo shaking hands with men Aurora knew from newspapers, and the photographs followed her with their dead eyes and her own face. In the glass of the frames, looked back at her thin and dark and strange. They reached the study. Lucia opened the door. The room smelled like leather and old cigars and the specific dry sweet must of bound books that had been bought by the yard and never opened. There was a heavy desk in the center. There was a wall of shelves. There was, above the cold fireplace at the far end of the room, a large oil portrait of an old woman in black with her hands folded in her lap. Lucia walked to the portrait. She lifted it down from the wall. Behind it was the safe. Lucia knelt. She put her ear close to the dial. She closed her eyes and her fingers began to turn, and Aurora stood at the door of the study with her hand against the frame and listened for the sound of the front door, listened for the sound of the elevator, listened for any sound at all. The first number caught. The second number caught. Lucia was reaching for the third when the lights in the hallway behind Aurora came on, all at once, every overhead, every sconce. Aurora froze. A voice came from the far end of the hallway. It was a man's voice. It was calm. It was almost gentle. It was a voice Aurora had heard before, exactly once, in the kitchen of a building in Midtown about 6 hours ago. "Don't turn around, Aurora," Dante Valente said, "and tell Lucia to step away from her father's safe. Slowly. With her hands where I can see them. There is somebody here who would very much like to say hello to both of you before any more mistakes get made tonight." Aurora did not turn around. Her hand stayed flat against the frame of the study door, and her eyes stayed on Lucia, who had gone very still on her knees in front of the safe, with one finger still touching the dial. The third number had not been entered. Lucia's other hand was hidden by her thigh, and Aurora could not tell whether the hand was reaching for something or simply waiting. "Dante," Aurora said. She did not raise her voice. She did not turn. "Who is with you? Walk into the study, Aurora. Who is with you? Walk into the study and find out." She walked into the study. Lucia's head turned slightly to track her. Aurora stopped beside the desk and put her hand on the polished wood for something to hold, and only then did she turn around to face the doorway. Dante stood in the hall. He had a pistol low at his side, held the way a man holds a tool he does not enjoy holding. There was a small, dark stain spreading along the cuff of his shirt that had not been there in his kitchen, and his hair was wet from rain she had not been outside long enough to know about, and his face had a kind of exhaustion in it that no expensive suit could cover anymore. Behind him stood Marco. Marco was on his feet. His shoulder was wrapped in clean gauze. His face was pale and his eyes were red, and he was holding his own arm at the elbow the way an old man holds a thing that hurts him, but he was standing, and he was looking at her, and he was alive. And behind Marco, 2 steps further back in the hallway, stood a man she did not know. He was old. He was 60, maybe 65. He had a face that had been broken several times by the world and put back together by stubbornness. He wore a long, dark coat and a flat cap, and his eyes were the color of dirty water. And when he saw Aurora step into the light of the study, he did something nobody else in the hallway did. He took the cap off. "Miss Bianche," he said. His voice was rough. It carried an accent she could not place, somewhere south of Naples maybe, somewhere old. "Who are you?" Aurora said. "My name is Salvatore. I worked for Mr. Valente's uncle for 31 years. I was the man who found him in the kitchen on the morning of the 4th of October. I was the man who washed his face. I was the man who put the box on a boat to Palermo because he asked me to the last time I saw him, in case anything happened to him that should not have happened. I am the man who sent the box back when Mr. Valente called for it 3 weeks ago. And I am the man who has spent every night since that morning trying to understand why your brother's name was in the last letter my employer wrote." The room went very quiet. Lucia, still on her knees, slowly took her finger off the dial of the safe. "Lorenzo's name," Aurora said. "Yes. In your uncle's letter." She was looking at Dante now, and Dante was looking at Salvatore. And Salvatore reached one weathered hand inside his coat and drew out an envelope. It was thick. It was creased. It had been read many times. "Mr. Valente asked me not to give you this," Salvatore said. "He believed it would be too much for you tonight, on top of everything. He believed there was a kinder order to put these things in. With respect to Mr. Valente, I do not agree. I am an old man, and I will not be alive much longer, and I do not want to die having let a young woman take a knife to her own throat because the men around her were too gentle to tell her the truth. So I will tell it. May I come in?" Dante did not move. "Salvatore," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." "Come in." The old man came in. He walked past Dante and past Marco and into the study, and he laid the envelope on the desk under the lamp, and Aurora looked at the envelope and did not pick it up. Lucia stood up from in front of the safe and came to stand beside her, and Lucia's hand found Aurora's wrist and held it, the way Aurora's father had held her wrist an hour ago in a hospital bed. Salvatore looked at her. "Your brother came to my employer," he said, "in the summer before he died. He told my employer that he had been approached by federal people. He told my employer that he had been keeping a record of certain things for some months. He told my employer that he had figured out that a man inside the Valente organization had been running a parallel business that nobody knew about, and that the parallel business involved hospitals and pharmacies and certain old men who had information about old buildings on 86th Street. Your brother did not want to go to the federal people with what he knew. He had been forced to make the deal because of his own troubles, but he was not a man who wanted to be a traitor. He came to my employer instead. He asked for help. He asked for protection. He said he had a sister and a sick father, and he did not want to die. My employer told him to come back in 3 days with what he had. My employer was killed before 3 days had passed." Aurora was holding her breath. "And then my brother," she said, "was killed a week later." "Yes." "By Antonio." The old man looked at her for a long second. Then he shook his head slowly. "No, miss. Not by Antonio Russo." Antonio Russo was a button in this. Antonio Russo was the loud man on the stage. Antonio Russo took the money and built the wine bar and walked around the neighborhood with his face full of himself, because the man who pulled his strings wanted everyone to look at Antonio while the real work happened in another room. Antonio did not kill your brother. Antonio did not even know your brother was going to be killed until after it was done. The man who killed your brother is the man who has been in this apartment many times. The man who killed my employer. The man who has been quietly running the parallel business for 9 years. The man who, this very night, was supposed to come here at 5 in the morning to remove certain papers from the safe behind that portrait before Antonio Russo got home, because Antonio Russo's usefulness has ended, and the man was going to leave certain things in this safe to be found, and certain things to be removed, so that the next chapter of the story would have the right villain in it. Lucia's hand tightened on Aurora's wrist. "My father is not the villain," Lucia said softly. "No, miss. Your father is a pig, but pigs do not always run farms. Sometimes pigs are kept in nice rooms by farmers, and they are fed well, and they are allowed to think they are in charge until the day the farmer needs to make sausage." "Who?" Aurora said. She had stopped breathing properly somewhere in the last minute. "Who is the farmer?" Salvatore looked at Dante. Dante closed his eyes for 1 second. He opened them. He looked at Aurora, and the tired in his face had become something else now, something deeper and sadder. And he said the name himself because Salvatore had given him the courtesy of letting him be the one to say it. "Carmine Ricci," Dante said. Aurora's hand left the desk. Carmine Ricci. The old man at the bar. The dying man at the bar. The man with pancreatic cancer who had been listening to her insult Dante at the Plaza Hotel and had looked at the floor when she did. The man on the ruling council. The man whose voice she had heard growing up in her father's restaurant on Sunday afternoons when he came in for veal and a glass of red and tipped the busboys in 20s. The man who had touched her hair once when she was 11 years old and called her Bella and given her a peppermint from his pocket. The man, she realized with a cold sliding horror, who had been at her brother's funeral, who had stood in the back of the chapel in a black coat and waited for the line to clear and then come up to her father and embraced him. And her father had cried into his shoulder, and the old man had patted her father's back and said something quiet about loss and loyalty and how the neighborhood would take care of them. "He came to my father's funeral mass," she heard herself say. "He came to my brother's funeral. He stood in the front row. He kissed my mother on the cheek." "Yes, miss. He has been in our house. He has been in our restaurant. He has been at our table. He has held my mother's hand at her own funeral before my brother. He held it. He was the one who organized the flowers. Yes, miss. He is the one. He is the one. Yes." Aurora found a chair behind her with the back of her knees. She sat down without meaning to. Lucia followed her down, kneeling beside the chair, still holding her wrist. From the doorway, Dante stepped further into the room and closed the study door behind him, very quietly, and Marco came in too and sat down heavily on the leather sofa against the wall and put his head in his good hand. "Antonio Russo," Lucia said. "My father, he was the loud one," Salvatore said. "Yes, miss, he has done many terrible things in his own right. He stole your friend's father's restaurant. He sat in the wine bar drinking wine over it. He helped cover for Mr. Ricci. He gave orders to the man with the syringe tonight, on Mr. Ricci's behalf, because the man with the syringe is technically on his payroll. But the brain inside the operation has always been at the other end of the table. The man whose face is on the back wall of every photograph. The man who has been dying loudly of pancreatic cancer in front of every family in this country for almost 2 years and has not actually been dying. The man who has used his cancer the way a magician uses a handkerchief, to make everybody watch the wrong hand. He's not sick, Aurora said. He is sick. He is not dying. There is a difference. And you knew this, she said to Dante. I suspected it 3 weeks ago. I confirmed it tonight. I confirmed it while you were in the hospital. And you let me leave the kitchen anyway. You let me drive to the hospital without telling me. I did not know the full shape of it when you left. I did not know Carmine was going to send a man into your father's room tonight. I thought we had longer. I sent 2 men ahead of you to the hospital, and I sent 4 more behind you. I did not send enough. The 2 on the loading dock were not my men, Aurora. They were Carmine's. They were waiting in case you ran. They were waiting in case you got cold feet about staying in the room with my men. They were the fail-safe. I did not know about them. By the time my driver Eli understood you had gone out the back instead of the front, you were already in a cab and I lost you for a little over 2 hours. Marco called me from the hospital. We have been driving since. How did you find me here? Lucia. Lucia's head came up. What about me? She said. Lucia, I have known about you for 2 years. I have known you were going to do something one day.
I have known you were going to do it the night you were sure enough to do it. I have had a man on your service entrance for 2 months. He called me 40 minutes ago when you came in. I came straight here. I came hoping I could stop you from opening that safe. Why?
Because the things in that safe will hurt you, not your father. You. There are things in that safe about your mother. There are things in that safe that no daughter should ever have to read about her own mother. Your father kept them because he is a sick man who likes to keep evidence of his power over people. The things in there were going to be used by Carmine tonight, when he came in here at 5, to give you a reason to keep your mouth shut for the rest of your life. He was going to leave you a note. He was going to leave you certain photographs. He was going to make it very clear to you, without ever saying it out loud, that if you ever spoke against your father or against the man behind your father, certain things about your mother would become public, and they would destroy what was left of her name. I came here to stop you from finding them. I came here also because Carmine is on his way. He should have been here by now. Aurora looked at the clock on the desk. It said 4:46. He's late, Dante said. Why is he late? Marco said from the sofa. His voice was hoarse and small. Because he had to drive across town to confirm that a man he sent to a hospital tonight did not come back. Because he had to send other men to find out what happened. Because by now he knows that one of the men on the loading dock did not come home either, since the man in the gray jacket from the hospital caught up to him in the parking lot of a diner in Queens and made him stop coming home. Carmine is now in a car coming up the FDR with 2 of his closest men, and he is not coming here to clean out a safe anymore. He is coming here to find Lucia, because Lucia is the loose end he did not see, and because he has just learned that Aurora is alive and Antonio is in Atlantic City. He is coming here, in his own words, to put the cap on the bottle. He said that, Aurora said, on a wire. Yes. The man in the gray jacket was wearing one. Carmine called him 15 minutes ago. We have the recording. When does Carmine get here? Dante looked at the clock again. 12 minutes. Maybe 10. Aurora stood up. She did it slowly. She did it with the careful balance of a woman with 11 stitches in her shoulder and very little sleep. And she walked across the study to the desk, and she picked up the envelope Salvatore had laid there. She did not open it. She held it in her hand, and she felt its weight. And the weight was the weight of 3 years of her life, and she folded it once and put it in the pocket of the dark sweater Lucia had loaned her. Where do you want me? She said. Dante looked at her. Aurora! Where do you want me, Dante? Tell me where you want me to be when he walks through that door. Because he is going to walk through that door, and he is going to expect to find Lucia at the safe, and Antonio in Atlantic City, and me bleeding out behind a hospital. He is going to expect to walk in here and close the bottle. So tell me where you want me to be standing when he opens it instead. Dante looked at her for a long second. Then he gave her the smallest possible smile. It was the first smile she had ever seen on him. It did not last. Sit at the desk, he said. His desk. Antonio's desk. Sit in his chair. Don't move when Carmine comes in. He will look at you, and he will not understand for a half second, and the half second is what we need. Salvatore stays behind the door. Marco stays on the sofa. Lucia goes into the bedroom across the hall, and she does not come out until I call her name. Are we clear? No, Lucia said. I'm not going into a bedroom. I'm staying. Lucia, he is my father's friend. He has eaten in this apartment. He has held my hand at my mother's grave. I am not going into a bedroom. Dante did not argue. He nodded once. Stand behind the desk. Behind Aurora's right shoulder. Hands where I can see them. If anything happens, you go down behind the desk. You do not stand up until I say. Lucia nodded. Salvatore moved to the wall behind the door. He was an old man. He moved like a younger one. He took something out of his coat that Aurora did not look at too closely and held it at his side. Marco stayed on the sofa. Dante stepped back into the hall and closed the door of the study almost all the way, leaving a 1-inch crack of light, and then he walked away from the door. Aurora heard him go down the hall toward the foyer of the apartment. He did not come back. She sat in Antonio Russo's chair. It smelled like the inside of his coat. It smelled like cigars and old leather and a cologne that had been popular 30 years ago. She put her hands on the wood of the desk, and she felt the carved edge under her palms, and Lucia came around behind her right shoulder and stood there, and the two of them waited. The clock on the desk ticked. It ticked for what felt like an hour and was probably 9 minutes. Then she heard the elevator down the hall, the chime, the slow slide of the doors, a pair of footsteps in expensive shoes, then a third pair, lighter, and a fourth pair, heavier. The voices were too low to make out at first. There was a small dry cough that Aurora recognized from a Sunday afternoon when she was 11 years old, and her hands on the desk did not shake, and Lucia's hand on her shoulder did not shake either. And somewhere in the apartment, Dante Valente said something quietly that she could not hear. The voices changed.
There was a beat of silence. There was Carmine Ricci's voice, raised slightly, asking a question Aurora could not make out. There was Dante's voice answering. There was another beat of silence, longer this time. Then there was the sound of one of Carmine's men reaching for something inside his coat, and there was the sound of Dante's voice saying, very calmly, "Don't." And there was the sound of the man not listening to him, and then the apartment exploded.
The first shot was so loud it did not register as a shot. It registered as a wall coming down. The second shot was a higher, sharper sound, and the third shot was somewhere closer, in the hallway just outside the study. And Aurora flinched, and Lucia put both hands on her shoulders and pressed her down behind the desk. And Aurora went down because Lucia made her go down. And the study door slammed open, and a man in a long coat fell into the room with half of his throat missing. And the man was not Carmine, and the man hit the rug face first and did not move again. Salvatore stepped out from behind the door. He stepped over the body. He walked into the hallway. There were more shots. There was a sound that was not a shot. A sound that was a man's body hitting a wall and sliding down it. And there was a single high cry that ended quickly. Then there was no more shooting. Then there was a long, terrible silence. Lucia was breathing hard against the back of Aurora's neck. Aurora's own breath was coming in short, jagged pieces. Her shoulder was screaming. Her hands were flat against the rug. The rug smelled of dust and old smoke, and now, faintly, of blood that was not hers. She lifted her head. She got up from behind the desk slowly, against Lucia's hand on her shoulder, which was trying to keep her down, and she walked toward the door of the study on legs that did not feel like legs. She stepped over the man with the throat. She went into the hallway. The hallway was bright. The hallway smelled of cordite and broken glass. There was a chandelier on the floor that had taken a bullet meant for somebody else. There was a man in a dark suit slumped against the wall beside the foyer with his hand still in his coat. There was another man on the floor closer to the elevator, face down, not moving. In the middle of the hallway, on his knees, was Carmine Ricci. His hands were on top of his head. His flat cap had come off and was on the floor in front of him. His thin gray hair was sticking up in tufts the way her father's had earlier tonight, and his face was very pale, and there was a small line of blood running from his right ear down into the collar of his white shirt. He was not dying. He was just kneeling, the way a very old man kneels on a hard floor, with all of his arrogance leaked out of him at last. Dante Valente was standing 3 feet in front of him. The pistol was up. The pistol was steady. Dante's face was the face Aurora had seen on the terrace of the Plaza Hotel 1,000 years ago. The face of a man who had decided a long time ago that expression was a luxury other people could afford, and the face had not aged a single hour in the time between. Salvatore was beside him. The old man had a hand on Dante's left arm. He was not holding it back. He was just touching it the way a brother touches a brother's arm. Aurora walked into the hallway. Carmine's eyes found her. There was a moment when she thought he would smile. She saw the muscles in his face begin to do the thing, the small upward pull at the corners that he had done 1,000 times in her childhood with peppermints in his pocket. She saw him recognize her. She saw him remember. He stopped himself. "Aurora," he said. His voice was thin, old. "Don't say my name. Aurora, listen to me. There are things you don't say my name." He stopped. She walked closer to him. She walked until she was standing 2 feet in front of him, and she looked down at the top of his head where the hair was thinning, and she could see the pink scalp underneath, and she could see the brown spots of age, and she could see the small movement of a vein at his temple, and she understood that this was the man who had ordered her brother to be killed in a parking garage on Atlantic Avenue. This was the man who had stood in the back of her brother's funeral chapel and watched her father cry into his shoulder. This was the man who had sat with her mother at her own kitchen table.
This was the man who had decided 3 years ago that her family was a loose thread.
She looked at Dante. She looked at the pistol. She looked back at Carmine. "Give it to me," she said. Dante did not move. "Aurora, give it to me, Dante. You don't want this. You don't get to decide what I want anymore. Give me the gun."
Aurora, listen. Listen to me. I have spent 3 weeks waiting for this. I have spent 3 years waiting for this without knowing I was waiting for it. This is mine. This man killed the only family I had. He killed your brother. He sent the man with the syringe tonight. He has done many other things. He is going to answer for all of them. He does not have to answer to you with your hand on a trigger. You do not have to be the person who pulls it. I have men. I have a process. I have people who can take him from here. The ruling council will hear what is on those recordings before sunrise. He will be exiled. He will lose every dollar. He will lose every name. He will spend whatever is left of his life in a room nobody visits.
That isn't enough.
It will have to be. Why? He looked at her. The pistol did not waver in his hand. Because the woman I want to walk out of this apartment with is not a woman who pulls that trigger. Because 3 years ago you decided you were going to kill me, and you spent 3 years becoming a person who could. And tonight you found out you had been wrong, and you stopped, and you did not pull the trigger on me even when you had the chance on a terrace with a knife in your bag. You have already done the hard thing tonight, Aurora. You have already done it. Do not undo it for him. He is not worth becoming what he tried to make you. She stared at Dante. The pistol in his hand was steady. Her own hands, at her sides, were not steady. She could feel them shaking against her thighs, and she could feel the envelope in her pocket, the envelope she had not opened, and she could feel the cut in her shoulder, and she could feel the small, dry warmth of Lucia coming up behind her in the hallway. Lucia stopped beside her. Lucia did not say anything. Lucia just stood there. Carmine looked up at the two of them. There was something in his face now that had not been there before. It was not fear. It was something quieter. It was something almost like relief. He had spent 2 years pretending to die slowly, and he was at last being looked at by people who knew the difference. "Aurora," he said one more time, "be quiet. I want you to know." I said, "Be quiet." He was quiet. She stood there for a long minute. The hallway was very still around her. Somewhere in the building somebody had heard the shots, and somebody was probably calling somebody, and police would arrive eventually, and Dante's men would have to be gone before that happened, and Carmine would have to be gone too, and the bodies in the hallway would have to be gone. And somewhere, in some part of her, she understood all of this without thinking about it. She had become, in the last 6 hours, a woman who understood things without thinking about them. She did not take the gun. She turned away from Carmine Ricci and she walked back into the study, and she sat down in Antonio Russo's chair behind Antonio Russo's desk, and she put her face in her hands, and she did not cry. She did not cry because she was past crying, but she sat there with her face in her hands, and she breathed for a long time. And she let the worst part of what she had wanted to do walk away from her into the dark. And when she finally lifted her head, Lucia was sitting on the corner of the desk, watching her. "It's done," Lucia said. "Is it?" They took him out. Salvatore and one of Dante's men. They went down the service elevator. They'll be at the East River before anybody finds the bodies up here. Dante is on the phone with someone. He's calling in the cleaners. He's calling in the council. He says by morning, Carmine will be in a basement in Bay Ridge, in a chair, with a recording on a table in front of him, and every old man in the country will hear it before lunch. He says Antonio will land in LaGuardia at noon and be picked up by people who used to work for him before they figure out he is not the one in charge anymore. He says, "It's done." Aurora nodded slowly. She took the envelope out of her pocket. She laid it on the desk between them. "I'm going to read this later," she said. "I'm going to read it when I'm with my father. He should be the one to hear it first. Whatever Lorenzo told the old man before he died, whatever it was that made Lorenzo decide to do what he did. My father gave Lorenzo to this world. He should be the one to hear how Lorenzo tried to leave it as a good man instead of a bad one." "Yeah," Lucia said. Aurora looked at her. "What about you?" "I don't know yet. Your father is going to lose everything by tomorrow night." "I know. You're going to lose everything that came with him. I never wanted any of it. You'll still lose it." "I know." Lucia reached out and put her hand on top of Aurora's on the desk.
They sat like that for a minute. Then Dante came into the study. He looked at Aurora. He did not look at the envelope. He waited until she lifted her face to him, and he stopped just inside the door. "Your father is awake," he said. "What?" "Marco just called the hospital. They have him stable. The doctors are talking about a full reversal of whatever was being given to him. He is asking for you again. He is going to live longer than anyone thought he was going to live. I do not know how much longer, but he is going to live longer." She closed her eyes. She felt the tears come up, and she let them. They did not make her shake. They just came. When she opened her eyes, Dante was still standing in the doorway. He had not moved. He was waiting for her to say something. He was, she understood with a small, soft shock, afraid of her. He was afraid that after everything she had learned tonight, after everything he had failed to tell her in time, she was going to look at him and see a man she could not forgive. She did not yet know if she could forgive him. That was not a thing to decide in this room. That was not a thing to decide tonight. She stood up. She walked across the study. She stopped in front of him. She looked up into his face. She put one hand very gently against his chest, against the stain on the cuff of his shirt, against the place where she could feel his heart still going too fast under the fabric. "Take me to my father," she said. He nodded. He put his hand over hers. They walked out of the study together. They walked past the bodies in the hallway, which were being covered now by men Aurora had never seen, working in silence, the way men work when they have done this before. They walked past the chandelier on the floor and the man with his hand still in his coat and the broken glass that crunched under their shoes. And they got into the service elevator, and Lucia got in with them, and Marco got in with them, holding his bad shoulder, and the doors closed and the elevator descended. In the parking garage under the building, Eli was already waiting beside a black car with the back door open. Aurora got in. Lucia got in beside her. Marco got in the front. Dante walked around to the other side and got in last, and the door closed, and the car pulled out into the early gray light of the morning. The city was waking up. The sky over the East River had begun to turn a pale, dirty pink, and the streetlights were starting to flicker off, and a delivery truck rattled past them at an intersection somewhere in Midtown, and a man in a windbreaker was sweeping the sidewalk in front of a deli with a long-handled broom. Aurora watched all of it through the window. She thought about her brother. She thought about Lorenzo at 24, sitting across from an old man in a back room somewhere, saying, "I have a sister and a sick father, and I do not want to die." She thought about him being afraid in that room and asking for help, and being told to come back in 3 days. She thought about him going home from that meeting and eating Sunday dinner with her and laughing at one of her jokes about the woman in the apartment above them who played the same opera record at 3 in the morning and not telling her any of it. She thought about her father saying her name in a bed. She thought about Carmine Ricci's flat cap on the floor of the hallway. She thought about the man in the scrubs and the cup of water and the lanyard and the corner of the name badge against the brow of his eye. She thought about how she had spent 3 years learning how to become a knife, and how, in the end, she had not used the knife. How somebody else had used a quieter thing in her place. How the woman who walked out of Antonio Russo's apartment building in the gray dawn was not the woman who had walked into the Plaza Hotel in a white silk dress. The woman who walked out was tireder. She had stitches in her shoulder. She had a dead friend's name on her tongue and a living friend's hand in her hand. She had a father at the end of a car ride who was going to know her face when she walked into the room. She did not yet know what she was going to do with the rest of her life. She knew she was going to read the envelope in her pocket. She knew she was going to sit with her father for as long as he had left, and she was going to ask him about the things he had been too proud to tell her when she was young. She knew she was going to call Marco's daughter and apologize for keeping him out all night. She knew she was going to ask Lucia, one day soon, about the woman who had been turning over in bed when Aurora had called. She knew she was going to look at Dante Valente in daylight, eventually, and decide what he was to her. She knew it was not going to be tonight. Tonight she was going to a hospital. Tonight she was going to put her face against her father's shoulder and let him say her name properly, in a voice that was clear, for the first time in a year. The car turned onto the FDR. The river came up on the right, gray and wide, with the lights of the bridges still on against the lightening sky. Aurora pressed her forehead against the window. Lucia's hand was in her hand. Marco's good shoulder was against the headrest in front of her. Dante's leg was warm against her thigh on the seat. Eli drove without speaking, The radio was off. The morning came up over the city very slowly, the way mornings do after the worst nights. And Aurora Bianca, who had spent 3 years building a weapon out of herself and had finally, tonight, learned that she had been aimed at the wrong target by the wrong hands, watched it come. She had wanted revenge. She had found instead the truth. And in the wreckage of the lie she had lived inside for 3 years, she had found a father who could still say her name, a friend who had never stopped picking up her call, an old man's letter in her pocket, and a place in the world that did not yet have a shape but was, for the first time in a very long time, no longer being chosen for her by somebody else. The car kept going. The river kept going. Aurora closed her eyes and let the city carry her toward her father. Sometimes the people we have been taught to hate are not the people who hurt us. Sometimes the people who hurt us have been sitting at our kitchen table our whole lives, smiling, with peppermints in their pockets, waiting for us to look the wrong way. And sometimes the only thing strong enough to find them is a woman who has spent 3 years sharpening herself into a knife, looking up one cold November night and choosing, in the last moment, not to be the knife at all. That, in the end, was what saved her. Not the revenge, the choosing.